Burgess. I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm here to share with you guys a recipe for crispy kale chips. So I don't know about you, but I often find myself, especially after a long workout, just craving something salty and crunchy, and so a lot of times I want to go for that bag of potato chips. But as we know, potato chips aren't always the best for our bodies, not super high in nutrients, and they're a little high in fat that is not so great for our hearts. So we want to try to find a healthier alternative that's still going to give that delicious crunch, salty flavor. So today I've got these kale chips that I'm going to make, and kale chips are a great option because kale is a really great vegetable to use. And making them into chips can also just really improve the flavor of that kale. So today I've got some fresh kale here from the garden. It does look a little holey. The caterpillars got into the kale, so there's a few holes in the leaves, but it'll do. If you want to go to the grocery store and grab a bag of already washed kale, that works just as well. It might save you a little bit of time. But today I'm going to use this fresh kale. So I've got my salad spinner here. One thing you want to think of when you're making some kind of chip in the oven, especially with kale, is you don't want it to be too wet because that's going to prevent it from getting crispy, and we want that crunchy texture that really is satisfying when we're snacking. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some of this kale into the salad spinner and just get some of that water off. Just close that and spin it. So that'll get all the water off, and so then once we get the oil on there, that'll help it crisp up in the oven. And so then I'm going to go ahead and do that with the rest of the kale. Okay, so now I've got my kale all spun, all the water's off of it, so I'm going to go ahead and get some of it out. And one thing that I'd like to show off is this cool little gadget. It kind of looks like a leaf, and it's got different sized holes in it. And so what you can do is, you know, when you're making kale chips, you don't really want those really stemmy pieces in there because they're a little too fibrous and just not very fun to eat. So what you can do instead is, with this gadget, you put the stem through the hole that fits it, and then when you pull it through, it pulls off the leafy part and separates it for you. So that's a really great way to save on some time and just make it easier so you're not having all these extra stems in there. So now that I've separated the leaves out from the stems, another cool thing you might think about is with these extra stem pieces, you don't necessarily want to throw them out. That's kind of just a waste of food. Instead, you can keep them in your freezer and then throw them in smoothies, blend them up. The blender will take care of that kind of fibrous texture, I guess, with the stems, and you won't even notice that it's in there, but it's going to add some great vitamins and minerals to your smoothies. So I'm going to go ahead and save my stems in a separate bowl and get the rest of these leaves off from the kale. Alright, so now I've got all my kale leaves here. They're all dried and separated from the stems. So now I want to start adding some of the flavor components as well as the oil that'll get those chips to be crispy in the oven. So first I'll start with this oil. Right here I've got some avocado oil, which is a great option. It has monounsaturated fats for those of you that are interested in more of the science. But just to really simply understand what it means is that it's going to be healthy for your heart. Another great option that might be a little more affordable at the grocery store is olive oil. Olive oil is another really accessible oil that you can place over these chips. And so what I'm going to do today is use the olive oil. Just take about a tablespoon and pour it over the kale. You really just want enough to kind of coat the kale. Not too much, because if you have too much oil, then they're just kind of going to be greasy and really not be that crispy texture that we want. And then for another little bit of flavor, I've got some peanut butter over here. So I usually take about a tablespoon and just drop it over the top. Peanut butter is a great ingredient to use because it's going to give you that protein that is really important after a workout and when you're trying to build up some muscle. And it also has some healthy fats that'll keep you satiated or keep you feeling full. Another thing you can do is use almond butter. That's another great option if you like that better. And so what I'm doing now is just massaging the kale, getting that oil all around all the pieces, covering them, as well as the peanut butter. And then once that's nice and mixed, I'm going to add some salt as well. Just a little bit for flavor. You don't really need to go overboard because the peanut butter also has a little bit of salt in it. And just massage that together. And then the really cool thing about these chips is that they're really easy to switch up. You can add a ton of different seasonings to fit whatever you like. So for example, I've got everything bagel seasoning here, which is a really great ingredient. You can put them on the kale chips, it'll taste great. You can throw this seasoning really on anything, like some eggs after a workout or toast, anything like that. And so I can throw that on the kale chips if I want to switch it up. Maybe my family's craving something a little spicy, so I could even throw some chili powder or even cayenne if you want to do that. So there's a lot of ways to make this recipe your own, and it's really just up to you to experiment in the kitchen and have some fun with it. And so now I'm ready to take the kale and put it onto the baking sheet. So I've got my kale chips here now. The kale's all mixed together with all the oil, peanut butter, and salt. And I've got a cool baking sheet here set up with a couple cooling racks on top. And so if you have cooling racks at home that you can throw over your baking tray, that'll help get the air under the chips as well as on top, so it'll really get all of each piece of kale kind of crispy. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some of this kale onto this sheet over the cooling rack. And then I've got the oven preheating. It's around 275 on convection, so if you have the convex setting on your oven, that'll be great because it blows the air around and really helps get those kale chips crispier. But if not, no worries. But something to remember is that a little lower temperature, so probably closer to 300 versus 350, that'll help cook the chips slower, but then it'll let them really crisp up over time. All right, so I'm gonna throw these kale chips into the oven now, and they'll bake for probably half an hour. It might just change up a little bit depending on the oven that you have. So just every few minutes, peek in there, turn the light on, check, see if they look crispy and kind of brown, and then you'll know when they're ready.